Afro Tales podcast is a part of the Connected Podcast Network.
Ahoy, my friends. Welcome aboard the Afro Tales podcast. I'm your storyteller, Amon Mazingo. Join me as we explore the tales that grew from the people of indigenous and African descent in the Americas and the Caribbean.
After, come and see me, chef, who will impart upon you a recipe for the story you have just heard.
So with no further ado, let us set sail on this new age of exploration. Before you listen to this story today, understand that this story will be explicit. So if you do not want your young children to listen to it, please understand I am completely okay with that. There will be a lot of uses of the N-word. This is a little bit of a more graphic depiction of a folktale being told about members of slavery and their masters. The N-word is used quite frequently, and descriptions of violence are explicit. So this one may not be for your younger listeners. I would recommend 14 and up as a listener for this story. So without further ado, please let us go ahead and listen to this fascinating and entertaining story. High John the Conqueror. Now, I know you done heard some stories about old High John the Conqueror. Well, this gonna be another one that you gonna hear. See, way back, and you may have heard this already, but way back during the slavery time, there was a man named John, High John the Conqueror, to be exact. They called him that. And he was what they call a man. Now, some folks say he was a big man, but the way I heard it, he wasn't no bigger than the average height and didn't look no different than the average man. Didn't make any difference though. He was what they called a B-man. Be here when the hard times come, and be here when the hard times is gone. No matter how much white folks put on him, John always survived. John lived on this plantation in Mississippi. I'm not quite sure whereabouts in Mississippi, but it must have been on one of them cotton plantations up in what they call the Delta. John lived on one of them bad plantations too. They had plantations so bad up in there, and the white folks was so mean that rattlesnakes wouldn't even bite them. Afraid they'd poison themselves. Snakes only bit niggas. White folks was so mean up there, they'd shoot a nigga just to bet on whether the body would fall frontward or backwards. And then they'd go whoop the dead nigga's mama if the body fell the wrong way. That's the kind of plantation John lived on. But it didn't bother John none. He was a B-man. Wasn't no disputing that. John loved living. And although he was a slave, he had made up in his mind that he was going to do as much living and as little slaving as he could. He used to break the hose, accidentally, of course. Set old Massa's barn on fire, accidentally, of course. He always had a hard time getting to the field on time. And when he did get there, somehow the mule would accidentally tromp down a whole row of cotton before the boss man knew what was happening. Old Massa was never sure, though, whether or not John was doing all this on purpose, because John would work real hard some years and make a good crop. The next year, though, it seemed like everything he touched got destroyed. But the following year, he picked more cotton than anybody ever thought possible. So the white folks were never sure just whose side John was on. And you better believe that that was the way John wanted it. Well, it was after one of those seasons when John had really worked and old Massa decided he would reward John for it. Maybe it would encourage him to do good work all the time, Massa thought. So he gave John an old mule and a patch of ground so John could raise a few vegetables of his own. John thanked Massa, but the last thing John wanted was a mule of his own. Why should he have to raise his own vegetables when he could take Massa's? Stealing is what you did if you took something from another black person. Anything you took from white folks, well, was yours to begin with, because everything they had, they got because of your work. So John really didn't want the old mule. All it meant was that Massa would expect to see him out there plowing up the little patch of ground. And John had had enough of work for a while. With all the work he had done this year, he figured on not working hard for the next 5. He started thinking how he was going to get rid of the mule Massa had given. Bright and early the next morning, John went down to the barn and hitched up his mule. He decided to hitch up Massa's best mule to his mule to make the plowing easier. And he went out on the field and began plowing. Now, you know how stubborn mules are. There's some niggas like mules. Won't do right for doing wrong. Well, these were the same show-enough nigga mules. And every time the mule would balk, John would take that whip and hit Massa's mule. Whack! Get up there, Miss Ann. He nicknamed Massa's mule Miss Ann, and he'd hit that mule as hard as he could. Whack! What's wrong with you, Miss Ann? Act like you got some sense. Whack! But he never would hit his own mule. If John's mule acted like it was having a hard time, he'd stop and fan it and give it a sip of Kool-Aid. Well, one of them old Uncle Tom come by. You know the kind I mean. One of them house niggas who wore Massa's hand-me-down clothes. Them was the kind of niggas that would sell their grandmama if it meant they'd get a word of praise from the white folks. Them was the kind of niggas that just loved white folks. They wanted to be white folks so bad that always tried to walk in the shade. Walking in the shade wouldn't make them white, but at least they wouldn't get no blacker. Them kind of niggas loved old Massa so much that if Massa house caught on fire, the house nigga would say, "Massa, our house on fire?" House nigga barely had a house. If Massa was sick, house nigga would come around and say, "Massa, we sick, ain't we?" And you know that's how they are, 'cause I couldn't make up nothing like that. From what I've heard, we've got some house niggas with us today. If you people are talking about black power, it's a house nigga who runs down to the white folks and say, "Boss, Tom, Sally, Bob, and James are up there talking about this here black power." If the folks are talking about getting them some guns to defend themselves from the police, house nigga goes and tells the police. Living with the house nigga is worse than picking up a hungry rattlesnake and putting it inside your shirt. At any rate, It was one of them house niggas who come by and saw High John beating on Massa's mule. Great God Almighty! He took off for the big house. Massa! Roy, what's wrong with you? Oh Lord, Massa. Oh Lord. You ought to see what I just seen. Oh Lord, Massa. Well, nigga, stop with all this nonsense and tell me what you seen. Massa, John is down in the field with your best mule, and he's whipping it like whipping is going out of style. Massa, you got to do something before John kills our mule. You have to understand, John was a field nigga. John had never set foot in Massa's house and wouldn't have if he'd had the opportunity. Only way John would have gone in the big house was through the window one night with a knife in his hand. John worked in the fields, and if Massa's house caught on fire, you could be sure that John had set it afire and was down behind the barn praying for a big wind. And if Massa got sick, John was praying he died. I understand, too, that we got some field niggas running around today. Praise the Lord. Well, old Massa went marching down to the field to see if what Roy was saying was true. He got there, and old John was trying to carve his initials on that mule's backside. Whackity, whack, 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 whackity. John was making that whip talk like Martin Luther King Jr. preaching. Old Massa turned right red in the face. You know how white folks look when they get mad. John, what do you think you're doing? Massa, I'm glad you come by, 'cause I'm just plumb wore out trying to beat some sense into this mule of yours. I say gee, and he go ha. I say ha, and he go gee. I just can't do a thing with your mule, boss. Massa didn't know what to say for a minute, 'cause he'd expected John to be apologizing. Well, John, what are you doing with my mule anyway? You didn't ask me if you could use it. Well, I figured you wouldn't mind a bit once you saw the vegetables I was going to be bringing you to put on your table. For a minute, old Massa was sorry he had ever laid eyes on a nigga. Wasn't no doubt about it. Well, John, if I catch you beating on my mule one more time, I'm going to kill your mule. What's that, Massa? I said if you beat mine, I'm going to kill yours. Well, Massa, if you do, I bet I beat you making money. Massa just looked at John thinking he must have lost his mind. I don't know what sense you talking about, John, but you hit my mule one more time and your mule's going to be dead. Massa wasn't out of sight when old John started on Miss Ann one more time. Whackity, whack, whackity, whackity, whack. I mean, John just laid it on her that time. Massa come tearing back to the field. I told you, John, I told you. And he pulled out his knife and cut John's mule's throat. John shrugged his shoulder. Well, I guess I got to beat you making money. Now, what Massa didn't know was that John was a conjure man. I mean, John could conjure anything. He was even better than Aunt Carolyn died. And you know, she was one of the best. John could cast a spell and cast them away. He could tell when a man was going to die and a baby be born. He could tell when a woman was doing what she wasn't supposed to and a man was doing what he wasn't supposed to. And if John had a good reason, he could make the birds sing at midnight and the dew fall at noon on a hot summer day. High John was so famous, they even got a root named after him now, called the John the Conqueror root. And it's the most powerful root there is. Only thing more powerful is a black cat bone, and John had one of them too. Well, John cut off the mule's skin, dried it, and went into town to make some money. He sat down on the lawn around the courthouse and started shaking his mule skin. Fortune telling, fortune telling. A white man came up and said, "Can you tell my fortunes?" "Yes, sir." "If you tell mine, I'll give you $10. John shook the mule skin 3 times, held it up to his eyes, shook it again, threw some dust on it, shook the dust off, and looked at the mule skin again. "Oh, Lord, what you moaning about?" "No, I can't say." "What you talking about? What do you see in that mule skin?" John shook his head. "Let me explain this real close." And he turned the mule skin upside down. "Say the same thing this way too." John slowly folded the mule skin. "Boss, I just can't tell you. You wouldn't like it. If you don't tell me, I'll kill you." John chuckled. "You can do that if you want to, but then you never would find out." "I'll give you $100. John thought for a minute. "Boss, I'm just telling you what I saw on the mule skin. This is the mule skin talking, not me." Okay. Now what the mule skin say?" "Well, the mule skin said that you shouldn't go home early today. The mule skin say if you don't go home early, you won't see your wife and your best friend sitting in the house all by themselves. And the mule skin say they ain't reading the Bible to each other." The white man pulled his gun. "You're lying, and I'm gonna blow your head off." John just looked at him. "I knew it. White folks don't want to hear the truth. They just want to hear what they want to hear. You asked me, and I told you. Now you want to blame me for what your wife is doing." The white man slowly put his gun away. "If you're lying, I'm coming back here to kill you. Just be sure you bring $100 with you when you come." Well, the white man took off for home. And just like John said, his wife and his best friend were not reading the Bible. White man shot both of them, came back and gave John the money. John went back to the plantation after telling a few more fortunes. And as he was going to his house, he saw old Massa. "Yeah, Massa. What you so happy about, John?" "I told you, if you killed my mule, I'd beat you making money." And John pulled out enough money to pay for a house with. Of course, there was a whole lot of inflation then, so he didn't have more than $50. But it looked good anyway. Massa's eyes got real big. He had more money than he knew what to do with. But you know how greedy some white folks are. They got cash registers instead of souls. John, you think if I kill my mule, I could make some money?" "Oh, Massa, I know you could." Massa ran down to the barn, killed his mule, and skinned it. Next morning, he was in town bright and early. Mule skin for sale, mule skin for sale. Give you 2 bits for it, one man said. 2 bits? This mule is worth $100. All day, Massa went around yelling, mule skin for sale, and folks thought he had lost his mind. When sundown came, Massa threw the mule skin in the ditch and came home angry at John. Well, Massa, I didn't tell you to go try to sell no mule skin for $100. Why anybody knows a mule skin ain't worth more than 2 bits? What's wrong, Massa? These niggas about done drove you crazy. That what it is? These niggas would drive St. Peter to sin. You need a rest. You ain't thinking straight. Well, Massa was so mad he could have killed John, but he couldn't see a way he could do it and make a profit, so he let him live. A week or so later, Massa just happened to be talking to another slave owner. I got a nigga out on my plantation that can whoop any nigga in the world, the slave owner said. Can't whoop my nigga John. I got $25,000, say he can. It's a bet, John's owner said. We'll have the match in town a month from today. Massa couldn't wait for the match. He knew that John was probably going to get killed, and Massa didn't mind losing $25,000 for the pleasure of seeing it. Well, the news spread around the state quicker than a hoof-to-mouth disease. It was going to be a match between the 2 baddest niggas in Mississippi. All the white folks was planning on coming. The governor had announced he was coming and bringing his family. White folks didn't like nothing better than to see 2 niggas in the ring fighting each other until they both fell out. Well, John, Massa said one day, you getting ready for the match? John was stretching out on the grass eating some chicken. I'm ready, Massa. John, where'd you get that chicken leg from? Strangest thing, Massa. Last night, this chicken just walked in my house. And I was trying to chase it out, And that chicken got so scared that it jumped in the skillet of hot grease I had on the fire. And before I could do anything, it was all fried. So I thank the Lord for sending the chicken to a poor, honest colored man. You know something, Massa? John asked, throwing the chicken bone on Massa's hat brim. The Lord sure takes care of you when you live right. Massa didn't say a word, but stalked off angrily. He couldn't wait to see John get a good beating. Well, the day of the match came, and white folks were there from everywhere. There were white folks from Hang a Nigga, Mississippi, and white folks from Cut a Nigga, Alabama, and Burn a Nigga, Georgia, and even some white folks from Co-opt a Nigga, New York. The governor and his wife and daughter were there. The lieutenant governor and his family were there. The sergeant governor and his family. The corporal governor and his family. There were so many white folks there, it looked like a lynching party. About an hour before the match was to start, in come the plantation owner with his nigga Andy. Now, let me tell you, this was one big nigga. He was so big and strong that they had him tied with chains. He was snorting and growling and carrying on so that they had to chain him to one of the pillars of the courthouse. He was so big that he had to stoop down at night to let the moon go by. 4 white ladies fainted when they saw him. When John's master saw him, he began to feel sorry. He made the bet. He looked at that nigga Andy and could just see John getting pulverized. John deserved a good beating, but nothing like what he was going to get. Well, about 10 minutes before match time, in come John. And John was dressed like he was going to his own funeral. I mean, he was clean. He had him on a pair of black patent leather shoes with spats, some red trousers with a red coat, a white shirt, and a black string tie. Over his arm was a hand-carved cane studded with diamonds. He was wearing a Stetson hat and walking real slow, tipping his hat to everybody. John Diddy bopped down the aisle speaking to all the white folks. "How you doing, boss? It's good to see you. Haven't seen you since you sold my mama. How you doing, sir? Last time I saw you was the time you whipped my sister and rubbed some cuts with vinegar. That was to keep her from getting lockjaw." John was as polite as he could be, a perfect gentleman. After John had finished greeting all the white folks, he stepped out into the center and looked around. He pretended like he ain't even seen Andy, who was snorting like he had swallowed a box of snuff. John looked around until he spied the governor and walked over to him as fast as he could go, looking mean. John crawled over the governor's wife, stepped on the governor, and hauled off and slapped the governor's daughter. Pow! He hit that white girl all upside her head. He hit that girl so hard that her blonde hair turned brown. He hit her so hard she was cross-eyed for the rest of her life. Pow! He smacked her again. "Girl, didn't I tell you to stay at home and not come here today? What do you mean disobeying me?" Pow! He smacked her one more time. Well, when that nigga Andy saw John hit that white girl, he started getting away so fast that he pulled the courthouse down, broke his chains, and from what I heard, he didn't stop running until he got to Canada. Andy knew he couldn't whoop John, because if John was bad enough to slap a white woman, John was bad enough to whoop him. The white folks were kind of upset about John slapping the white woman until they realized that he had simply outsmarted everybody. Then they fell out laughing, especially the ones who had bet on John. Massa wasn't mad because the governor's daughter had said one time that his son wasn't good enough for her to marry. But the governor was kind of ticked off until old Massa slipped him half the 25 grand, at which point the governor told his daughter to shut up that screaming and hollering, or he was going to smack her one time himself. John went on back to the plantation, and even though he'd won Massa all that money, he still had to go out in the fields and work the next day. John couldn't see why, so he went to the barn and broke all the plows, the hoes, poured water in the cotton seeds, broke the mule's legs, told the house nigga to go tell it, and then stretched out under a big sycamore tree, put his hat over his face to keep flies off, and went to sleep. "John, you went too far this time," Massa hollered. "You just went too far this time. I'm going to kill you." John didn't even take the hat off his face. "Kill me, and I beat you making money." "Not this time." Massa shoved John in a gunny sack and drug him down to the river to throw him in. But he forgot his weights and had to go back to the house to get him. While he was gone, some of the other field niggas who'd been watching all along came out of the woods, untied the sack, and let John out. They filled the sack with stones, and when Massa came back with the weights, he threw the sack of stones in the river. By that time, though, John was home finishing his nap. Later that afternoon, he got up, grabbed his mule skin, and went into town to tell fortunes. Long about 6 that afternoon, he came back to the plantation, money just jingling in his pockets. "John, is that you?" Massa said when he saw him. "I told you, if you killed me, I'd beat you making money." "John?" "Yes, Massa." "John, you think if I let you kill me, I could make some money?" John's face was very serious when he said, "Massa, I know you could." John shoved old Massa in a gunny sack and tied him up. John called to the other field niggas, and they didn't forget their weapons. They carried the sack down to the river, and just as they were getting ready to throw it in, Massa called out, "You sure I'm gonna make some money, John?" "Massa, I know you is," John called back as old Massa hit the water and sank. And that's the story, or that's a story, of High John the Conqueror. The end. Wow. So that was an interesting story coming from the book Black Folks Tales by Julius Lester. And Julius Lester held no punches in the retelling of this story. With the amount of N-words that were in it, the amount of violence that was in it, the descriptions he used, that was normal. And unfortunate that was normal for that time period in which we're talking about slavery. I want to tell you, I edited a lot of the N-words out of the story. I edited some violence out of the story. I did not edit the Uncle Tom aspect out of that story simply because we have to understand that the use of Uncle Tom in this way was a misunderstanding. It should have been Sambo, as used as the term for those that betray their own kind to the master. Uncle Tom did not betray his own to the master. Okay? If you don't know that, please take time to go and listen to the Audible book of Uncle Tom's Cabin, or take time to read the book yourself, and you'll see what the true story is. Understand, it was changed. The character was changed to discourage black people from being like Uncle Tom and being a stand-up person and helping other black people. Okay, but you'll get all that in that story. This story is about the famous High John the Conqueror. And I just love how he handled those people. And yeah, I'm talking about those people. The way he was able to handle Master, and the way he was able to handle the situation with Andy, and devising a way to not have to even fight him. Not so much because I believe he might have been scared, but because he didn't want to fight another black man for the entertainment of his white oppressors. And I find that encouraging, to say the least. We should not have to entertain those that oppress us just because they want it. Now, listening to the story, you may have heard some bits from other stories that I've already told, kind of like the Talking High, Brissette. There's a few Anansi tales in this, and there's a few rabbit tales in this, and that's just the way folk tales are. That's the way folklore is. Things get borrowed and used and other characters are used to represent this character and that character. They're all the same character, just given different names. Understand that. But this book, this story, has some deep subject matter that I just really couldn't get into in this little bit of time that I'm giving myself to do this. So talk it over with your family. If you did let your children listen to this story, talk it over with them. Help them understand what is being said in this story. And maybe you can talk to them about slavery and about oppression and about bigotry and teach them why it was wrong and why we should never act that way toward each other again. Okay? So, anyway, now go see Chef. He has a wonderful recipe coming from Mississippi just for this story. And I know you will listen to this after Juneteenth, but maybe next year you can use this recipe for your Juneteenth celebration. All right? So until we meet again on this wonderful journey that we're on, as always, have a blessed day.
Welcome, my friends, to the Galley. I am your chef, and today we have a wonderful recipe inspired by the story you have just heard. Today, we will be creating Mississippi mud pies. Now, what will you need for this here recipe? For the crust, 15 chocolate graham crackers, 8 tablespoons unsalted butter melted, 2 tablespoons light brown sugar. For the filling, half a cup of unsalted butter melted, 1 cup semi-sweet chocolate chips melted, half a cup of light brown sugar, half a cup of granulated sugar, 1 teaspoon vanilla bean paste, a 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt, a half teaspoon of espresso powder, half a cup of hot water, 4 large eggs, and half a cup of Dutch cocoa powder. And for the topping, 1 cup heavy cream, 3 tablespoons of powdered sugar, 1 teaspoon vanilla bean paste, chocolate curls, which are optional, and of course, chocolate syrup, also optional. Now, how do we put this together? Fairly easy. For the crust, preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Add the graham crackers to a food processor and pulse until they become fine crumbs. Transfer to a bowl and make a well in the crumbs. Pour the melted butter into the well and mix to combine. Add the sugar and stir until combined. Press crust into the bottom and sides of a 9-inch spring-form pan. Using a straight-edge glass will help with this. Place the spring-form pan onto a large baking sheet and bake for 10 minutes. Now, for the filling. While the crust is baking, melt the butter in a microwave on 30-second intervals until fully melted and added to the large bowl for mixing. Melt the chocolate chips in a microwave as well for 30-second intervals, stirring between each until melted. Add to mixing bowl along with sugars, vanilla paste, salt, and whisk to combine. Stir together the hot water and espresso powder, and then add to the mixing bowl and whisk to combine. Whisk in the eggs one at a time. Remember, one at a time. Making sure no yolk is visible after each addition. Whisk in the cocoa until fully incorporated. The mixture will be slightly runny. Carefully pour the mixture into the prepared pie crust. Carefully transfer to the oven and bake for 40 to 45 minutes. Make sure the spring form pan is still on the baking sheet in the oven. Remove from oven and allow to cool to room temperature for about 1 to 2 hours. Once cool, prepare your whipped cream by heating together the heavy cream, powdered sugar, and vanilla in chilled metal bowl until soft peaks form. Then top the pie with the whipped cream recipe and chocolate and serve. And that is it, my friends. Now, go. Make this recipe yours. And until I have another wonderful recipe for you, remember the adventures of High John the Conqueror. And until next time, my friends, as always, enjoy.
Thank you, my friends, for coming on this voyage. Thanks to Art by Chalet for the logo, episode, and shirt designs. You can get t-shirts and other items on tpublic.com. You can contact me on all socials at AfroTalesCast. That's AfroTales Cast. And email me at AfroTalesCast@gmail.com. You may also become a benefactor by simply sharing with any and everyone, giving a thumbs up, a 5-star rating and review in your podcast app of choice, or simply donating on Patreon or Ko-fi.com. That's KO-FI.com. So until we meet again, may your winds be fair and your seas follow.